The afternoon sun hung low over the quiet streets, painting everything in a soft golden hue. The sound of sneakers against pavement echoed lightly as a teenage boy made his way home from basketball practice. His backpack bounced gently against his shoulders, filled with his gym clothes and a few schoolbooks. He wasn't in a hurry. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, and the gentle hum of traffic in the distance gave the world a calm rhythm. It felt like an ordinary day. He had just left the community center where he and a few friends had stayed late to shoot hoops. He was tired but happy, thinking about the leftover pizza waiting for him at home. He pulled out his phone, checked the time, and noticed a text from his mom saying she'd be home a little late. She worked for the FBI, something he was proud of but didn't talk about much. Most people just thought she had an office job, and he liked it that way. As he turned the corner, 2 police officers parked at a nearby intersection noticed him. They watched for a moment before one of them pointed toward him. The boy didn't notice at first. He was scrolling through music on his phone, deciding what song to play for the walk home. But as the police car began to roll forward slowly beside him, the air around him seemed to change. He felt that quiet, uneasy pressure, the kind that makes your chest tighten for no clear reason. "Hey, you there," one of the officers called out through the open window. The boy stopped and looked over, confused. The car door opened and the officer stepped out. "Come here for a second." The boy hesitated. He looked around, unsure if the officer was really talking to him. "Me?" he asked, pointing to himself. "Yeah, you," the officer said, walking closer. "Let me see some ID." The boy's heart picked up speed. "I'm just walking home," he said softly, trying not to sound nervous. He reached for his wallet slowly, remembering what his mother always told him. Move calmly, never make sudden motions. The second officer got out of the car too, hand resting near his belt. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. "Basketball practice," the boy replied. "At the community center." He tried to keep his voice steady. His palms were getting sweaty and his throat felt dry. The officer took his ID and studied it for a moment, then looked back at him. "We got a call about a suspect in this area," the officer said. "Matches your description." The words hit him like cold water. "I didn't do anything," he said quietly. His stomach twisted. He wasn't sure what to do, run, stay. He knew running would only make things worse, so he stayed still. The first officer started asking more questions. Where he lived, who he was with, what was in his bag. The boy answered carefully, but he could tell they didn't believe him. One of them asked to look inside his backpack. He nodded, unzipping it slowly. Inside were his basketball shoes, a towel, and a half-empty water bottle. The officer checked everything, then exchanged a look with his partner. The air was heavy with suspicion that didn't make sense. A few people walking by slowed down, watching from a distance. Some pulled out their phones. The boy felt all those eyes on him, strangers looking at him like he was already guilty of something he didn't even understand. One officer spoke into his radio, saying something about a possible match. The boy tried to explain again that he was just coming from practice. "My coach can tell you," he said, voice trembling slightly. "You can call him, please." "Keep your hands where I can see them," the officer said sharply. The boy froze, his hands lifting slightly. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't dare touch it. He didn't even blink toward it. The second officer frowned. "Why are you nervous, huh? You hiding something?" "I'm not hiding anything," the boy said. I don't understand what's happening." He looked down the street, hoping maybe someone familiar would come by. Maybe a neighbor or his mother's friend. But the street was quiet except for the soft chirping of evening birds. His heart thudded in his ears. "Turn around," the first officer said. "We just need to make sure you're not carrying anything illegal." The boy did as he was told. His hands shook slightly as he turned. He kept thinking of his mom, her calm voice, her steady eyes. She always said, "If something ever happens, stay calm and respectful. I'll always have your back." He tried to hold on to that thought. The officer started patting down his pockets, searching for something that wasn't there. The boy could feel the stares of people across the street, could hear the faint buzz of someone recording on their phone. It made him feel small, exposed, humiliated. His phone buzzed again, this time louder. One of the officers looked annoyed. "What's that?" "It's my mom," the boy said quietly. "She's calling me." "Don't reach for it," the officer warned, his hand tensing. "You move, I'll take it myself." The boy stood still, eyes wide, trying not to breathe too fast. The officer reached into his pocket, pulled out the phone, and looked at the screen. "Mom," it said. He scoffed, setting it on the hood of the car. At that exact moment, a black SUV turned the corner down the street. It slowed as it approached, the engine low and smooth. The boy didn't recognize it right away. His mind was too full of fear. But when the car stopped a few feet away, the driver's door opened and everything shifted. A tall woman stepped out, wearing a dark blazer and a calm, professional expression. Her presence alone seemed to change the air. She scanned the scene quickly, her son standing frozen with two officers in front of him, and her expression hardened. She walked toward them with quiet authority. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, please stay back," one officer said automatically. "We're handling a situation." She stopped just long enough to pull a leather badge holder from her pocket and flip it open. The golden letters gleamed in the fading light. "I'm Special Agent with the FBI," she said. "And that's my son you're handling." Both officers froze. The street went silent except for the hum of the car engine. The one holding the phone glanced between the badge and her face, his posture stiffening. "Ma'am, we didn't know—" "That's the problem," she said sharply. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone used to being in control. "You didn't know, but you acted anyway." The boy felt a rush of relief so strong it nearly made him dizzy. He wanted to run to her, but she held up a hand gently. Not at him, but at the officers. "Step away from him," she ordered. The officers did, their confidence gone. The one who had been checking his backpack suddenly looked unsure of what to do with his hands. The other cleared his throat, mumbling something about mistaken identity. She didn't respond right away. She walked closer to her son, putting a protective hand on his shoulder. "Did they touch you?" she asked quietly. He shook his head, though his eyes were still glassy with fear. "They said I looked like someone," he whispered. She exhaled slowly, then turned back to the officers. "You stopped a kid walking home from basketball practice," she said. "No cause, no reason, just suspicion." The first officer tried to speak. "We had a call, ma'am. The suspect—" She cut him off. "The suspect what? Matched the description? You think that's good enough to stop and search a teenager?" Her tone was calm but edged with disbelief. "Do you even know what kind of damage this kind of behavior causes?" One of the bystanders had stepped closer, phone still recording. The officers noticed, their faces tightening with discomfort. They shifted their weight, unsure what to do or say next. The woman looked at both of them and then down at her son. "Get in the car," she said softly. He nodded and did as he was told, keeping his eyes down as he climbed inside. His hands were still shaking, but he felt safer the moment he closed the door. She turned back one last time. "You should both think about the choices you make out here," she said. "Because next time the person you stop might not have someone arriving in time." The officers said nothing. She gave them a final look, then got into her car and drove off, leaving the street in heavy silence. The bystanders lowered their phones, murmuring quietly among themselves. The two officers stood there for a long moment, watching the SUV disappear down the street, their earlier confidence completely gone. Inside the car, the boy sat quietly, staring out the window. His mother glanced at him, her face softening. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think so." She reached over, squeezing his hand. "You did everything right," she said. "I'm proud of you." He didn't say anything else. He just looked out at the passing houses, thinking about how a simple walk home had turned into something he'd never forget. The drive home felt heavy, even though neither of them said much. The road was quiet, lined with trees that swayed softly in the evening breeze. The boy kept staring out the window, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. The flashing lights, the sharp tone of the officers, the way his heart had raced when they told him to raise his hands. He could still feel the weight of fear sitting in his chest, refusing to leave. His mother kept her eyes on the road, her face calm but distant. Every few minutes she would glance at him, then look away. She knew he was shaken. She was too, though she hid it well. Years in law enforcement had taught her how to stay composed, how to control her emotions when chaos tried to take over. But tonight it was different. Tonight it was her own son standing on the other end of that badge. When they pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same as always. Neat garden, porch light glowing softly, a sense of safety. Yet for the boy it suddenly felt unfamiliar, as if something inside him had changed on that street. He followed his mother inside, setting his backpack by the door like he always did. She took off her jacket and hung it neatly on the chair. "Sit down," she said gently. "We need to talk." He nodded and sat at the kitchen table. The room smelled faintly of coffee and the lemon-scented cleaner she always used. The ticking of the clock filled the silence between them. She took a deep breath and sat across from him. "I know that was scary," she said softly. "But I need you to tell me everything from the start. What exactly did they say to you?" He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "They said I looked like someone," he began. "A suspect. They didn't tell me what for. They just told me to stop. I tried to explain I was coming from basketball, but they didn't want to hear it." She listened carefully, her hands folded in front of her. He told her about how they searched his bag, how people started filming, how one officer's tone grew sharp when he got nervous. She didn't interrupt, not once. When he finished, she let the silence sit for a moment before speaking. "You handled it the right way," she said finally. "You stayed calm. You didn't argue. You did everything I've always told you to do." He looked down at his hands. "It didn't matter," he said quietly. "They still looked at me like I did something wrong." Her chest tightened. "I know," she said. "And that's the hardest part." For a long time, they sat in silence. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Finally, she stood and walked to the counter, pouring herself a glass of water. Her reflection in the window looked tired. She had spent her entire career believing that justice meant fairness, that training and discipline could overcome bias. But watching those officers handle her son had reminded her how fragile that belief really was. She turned back to him. "You know, when I joined the Bureau," she began, "I wanted to make things better. I thought if I worked hard, if I did everything right, maybe I could change how people saw us. But today?" She paused, searching for the right words. "Today reminded me that we still have a long way to go." He looked up at her, his eyes full of questions. "Do you think they'll get in trouble for what they did?" She hesitated. "Maybe," she said slowly. "But that's not what matters most right now. What matters is that you're safe." He nodded, though his mind was still full of noise. He couldn't stop thinking about the way the officers' faces changed when his mom showed her badge. The instant shift from control to discomfort. "They were scared of you," he said quietly. She sighed. "They weren't scared of me," she said. "They were scared of what I represented, authority, accountability." He leaned back in his chair. "So they only listened because you're part of the FBI?" Her silence was answer enough. He shook his head, his voice low. "That's not fair," she nodded. "You're right. It's not." Outside, a car passed, its headlights sliding across the window. She watched the light fade, then reached over and placed her hand over his. "You can't let this make you afraid of the world," she said. "You can be cautious, but don't let fear control you. You did nothing wrong." "I know," he said, "but it still feels like I did." She squeezed his hand gently. "That feeling will fade," she said. "But I promise you it won't be forgotten. And maybe that's a good thing. Sometimes the things that scare us also make us stronger." He looked at her and saw how serious she was. For the first time since the incident, he felt a flicker of comfort. She stood, walked to the living room, and turned on a small lamp. The warm glow filled the space, pushing away the shadows. He followed her and sat on the couch. They watched TV for a while, something light just to break the silence. But even as laughter echoed from the screen, his mind was far away. Every time he blinked, he saw the flashing red and blue lights. Every time he heard sirens outside, he tensed. Later that night, after his mother went upstairs, he sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking clock. He looked at his phone. The video someone had taken was already online, spreading fast. The caption read, "Teen stopped by police, saved when FBI mom shows up." The comments were full of anger, debate, and sympathy. Some praised the mother for stepping in. Others doubted the story entirely. He scrolled through them, unsure how to feel. It was strange seeing strangers talk about him like they knew him. He put the phone down, staring into the dim light. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to walk home without being seen as something he wasn't. Upstairs, his mother couldn't sleep either. She sat on her bed, laptop open, typing a report to her supervisor. She kept it professional, sticking to facts, but inside she was furious. She wanted those officers to understand what they had done. Not just to her son, but to every parent who had to worry about their child walking home. She knew she couldn't let anger lead her. Change, she believed, only happened when people refused to stay silent. When morning came, the sunlight spilling through the curtains felt almost too bright. The boy woke early and went downstairs. His mother was already dressed, sipping coffee and checking her phone. She looked up and smiled softly. "Morning, morning," he said. "Are you going to work?" She nodded. "Just for a few hours. I have some things to take care of. You're staying home today, okay? Rest, I'll be back later." He agreed, though part of him wished she wouldn't go. She reached out, fixing the collar of his shirt, and gave him a reassuring look. "You're strong," she said quietly. "Don't let anyone make you doubt that." When she left, the house felt empty. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same chair she'd sat in last night. He thought about everything she'd said about fairness, fear, and strength. It was strange how quickly life could shift from normal to something unforgettable. A few hours later, there was a knock at the door. He hesitated, then opened it. One of the neighbors stood there holding a small box of pastries. "I saw the video," she said kindly. "I just wanted to check on you and your mom." He smiled faintly, surprised by the gesture. "We're okay," he said. "Thanks. Good," she said. "People are talking about what happened. Maybe that's how change starts, you know? When people start paying attention." He nodded. She left and he closed the door, thinking about her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe something good could come out of it, even if it didn't feel that way now. That evening, when his mother came home, she looked tired but lighter somehow. "I filed an official report," she told him. "Internal Affairs will review it. I also spoke to the police chief." He listened carefully. "Do you think they'll actually do something?" "I think they'll have to," she said. "There's too much attention now. But more importantly, people are talking about it. That's where real change begins." They had dinner together, quiet, simple, comforting. For the first time in 2 days, he laughed at one of her stories from work. It wasn't a big laugh, but it was real. She smiled, glad to see it. As the night grew darker, he went to bed feeling a little lighter too. The memory of fear was still there, but it no longer felt as heavy. He knew there would be challenges ahead. Questions, attention, maybe even anger, but he also knew he wasn't alone. His mother had shown him that strength didn't always come from fighting back. Sometimes it came from standing firm, speaking truth, and refusing to let fear win. Outside, the quiet street looked peaceful again. But for both of them, it would never be just another street. It was now a reminder, a place where fear had almost taken over but didn't, because in that moment love, courage, and truth had stood taller than anything else. The following week passed slowly. Though life was beginning to feel normal again, something inside both mother and son had shifted. The boy tried to go about his days as usual, school, basketball, video games, but there was always a shadow of that evening lingering in the back of his mind. Every time he saw a police car drive by, his stomach tightened a little. He would take a deep breath, remind himself he was safe, and keep walking. Still, it wasn't easy to forget. His mother noticed it too. She had a way of reading him without him saying much. Each morning before work, she made sure to look him in the eyes to remind him with a gentle smile that she was there. She knew what fear could do if left alone too long. It could grow quietly, changing the way a person saw the world. One afternoon, she came home early from work, carrying a small folder in her hand. He was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when she walked in. She set the folder down and gave him a calm look. "We need to talk about what happens next," she said. He looked up, unsure what she meant. "Next?" she nodded. "The department has started an internal investigation into what happened. They asked me to give a statement, and I did. But I also suggested something else, something bigger." He tilted his head. "Like what?" "A community meeting," she said. "A place where families, police, and local leaders can talk openly about what's been happening, about how we can do better." He blinked in surprise. "They agreed?" "They did," she said. "And they asked if I would speak." The boy sat back, trying to take that in. The idea of his mom standing in front of a crowd didn't surprise him. She was confident, strong, and used to pressure. But the thought of everyone talking about his story made him uneasy. "Are they going to mention me?" he asked quietly. "Only if you're comfortable with it," she said. "I won't share anything you don't want me to." He nodded slowly, thinking about it. Part of him wanted to hide from all of it, to forget. But another part of him, a smaller, braver part, wanted to help others understand what it felt like to be in his shoes. After a long pause, he said softly, "Maybe it's good if people know. Maybe it can help someone else, she smiled gently. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. The night of the meeting arrived a few days later. The community center was packed. Parents, teenagers, police officers, and local officials filled the rows of chairs. There was a soft buzz of voices, a mix of curiosity and tension. Some people came with anger, others with hope. Everyone came with opinions. The boy sat near the back next to one of his friends from school. He could see his mother standing at the front of the room, speaking quietly with a few organizers. She looked calm as always, but he could tell she was focused. He felt a mix of pride and nervousness. He wanted her to do well, but he also didn't want to relive that night again. When the meeting started, a local community leader stepped up first, thanking everyone for coming and setting the tone for the night, honest but respectful. Then the mother was introduced. The crowd clapped lightly as she stepped forward to the microphone. "Good evening," she began. Her voice carried clearly, steady but warm. "I'm here tonight as a law enforcement officer, but more importantly as a mother. Last week, something happened in this very neighborhood that forced me to see both sides of that reality at once." The room fell quiet. Even the shuffling of feet stopped. She continued, carefully choosing each word. "My son was stopped by 2 police officers who believed he matched the description of a suspect. They were wrong. And while he wasn't harmed, what he experienced in those few minutes could have changed him forever. It could have changed me too." Some people nodded slowly. Others avoided her gaze. "I'm not here to attack anyone," she said. "I work in law enforcement. I know how difficult and unpredictable the job can be. But I'm also here to say that fear and bias, even the smallest amount, can destroy trust in a second. And when trust is gone, the system doesn't work for anyone." The boy listened intently, amazed by her calmness. She wasn't angry, just honest. Her words didn't come from a place of blame, but from care. "We have to remember that behind every uniform is a person," she said. "And behind every person stopped on the street, there's a story. If we forget that, we lose what makes us human." When she finished, there was a long silence. Then one by one, people started clapping, slowly at first, then stronger. Even some of the officers joined in. She stepped back, taking a quiet breath of relief. After she sat down, a few community members shared their experiences too. Parents worried about their children, officers talking about their own fears on duty. The conversation was raw but respectful. For the first time, it felt like people were actually listening to each other instead of arguing. At one point, the boy's friend nudged him gently. "She's really good at this," he whispered. The boy smiled a little. "Yeah, she always is." After the meeting ended, several people came up to thank her. Even the police chief approached her, shaking her hand with a thoughtful expression. "We need more officers like you," he said quietly. "Ones who remind us why we joined in the first place." She appreciated the words, though she knew one meeting wouldn't fix everything. Still, it was a start. As they walked to the car afterward, the boy finally spoke. "You did really good, Mom." She looked at him and smiled. "Thank you. But you're the brave one. You lived through it and you chose not to stay silent." He shrugged. "I just didn't want anyone else to feel the way I did." "That's how change starts," she said. The days after the meeting were busy. Local news outlets reached out for interviews, wanting to cover the story. The mother agreed to one interview, making sure to keep the focus on awareness, not anger. She spoke about training, communication, and empathy, how these could make all the difference in tense moments. The boy stayed off social media for a while. He didn't want to read comments from people who didn't understand. Instead, he focused on school and basketball, finding comfort in routine. But something about him had changed. He carried himself differently, a little more thoughtful, a little stronger. One afternoon, after practice, he was walking home again. The same path, the same golden light. For a moment, he froze when he saw a patrol car parked near the corner. His heart jumped, memories flashing back. But this time he took a deep breath and kept walking. As he passed, the window rolled down. It was a different officer, young, polite-looking. "Hey, you the kid from the meeting last week?" he asked. The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," the officer smiled. "I wanted to say that was really brave of your mom. And you too." What she said, it made a lot of us think. "I just wanted you to know that." The boy blinked, surprised. "Thanks," he said quietly. "Stay safe out there, all right?" The officer added before driving off. As the car pulled away, the boy stood there for a moment watching. Something inside him eased. Maybe not everything was broken. Maybe people could change if they wanted to. When he got home, his mom was in the kitchen again cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. She looked up when he walked in. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "I saw a cop today." He said he went to the meeting. Said it made him think, she smiled softly. "That's good to hear. That means it was worth it." They ate dinner together, laughing over little things. For the first time in a while, the laughter felt easy and natural. The heaviness that had been hanging over them had started to lift. Later that night, as he got ready for bed, the boy looked out his window at the quiet street below. It looked peaceful again, just like before. But now he didn't see it as a place of fear. He saw it as a reminder of how quickly life could test you, and how strength could come from the most unexpected moments. Downstairs, his mother sat at the table, writing in her journal. She wrote not just about the incident, but about everything that had followed. The meeting, the people, the small signs of hope. She ended her entry with a simple line. "Sometimes, the world changes one honest conversation at a time." And upstairs, her son drifted to sleep, believing that maybe, just maybe, she was right. The air felt thick with tension, even though the scene had quieted down. The boy stood beside his mother, his shoulders tight and his heart still racing from the fear he had just felt. The officers who only minutes ago were barking orders at him now stood awkwardly, unsure of what to say. The woman's calm but commanding presence filled the street. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried strength, the kind that comes from experience and authority. She looked at the two officers, her eyes steady and unblinking. "Would either of you like to explain why my son was being stopped and questioned like a suspect?" she asked evenly. There was no anger in her tone, but there was something far more unsettling, a cold professional demand for accountability. The officers exchanged nervous glances before one finally spoke. "Ma'am, we received a call about a possible suspect matching his description," one of them said, fumbling for words. "We were just checking what exactly?" she interrupted, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Checking if he fits your idea of guilt because of his skin color? Or checking to see if you could intimidate a young boy walking home from practice?" The officer swallowed hard. The small crowd that had gathered around grew completely silent. A few people had their phones raised, recording every second. The other officer tried to regain composure and added, "It wasn't like that, ma'am. We just wanted to make sure." She raised her hand gently to stop him. "You wanted to make sure he wasn't who you thought he was. You didn't ask questions first. You made assumptions. My son was scared to even move because you shouted at him like he was dangerous. What part of that sounds like proper procedure to you?" Her calm voice cut deeper than anger ever could. The officers both stood stiff, realizing they had made a mistake that would not easily be forgotten. The woman turned to her son, her face softening instantly. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's okay now," she whispered. "You did nothing wrong." He nodded, still shaken, but feeling safer now that she was there. After a long pause, one of the officers cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we didn't know, that I'm an FBI agent," she said, finishing his sentence for him. "You shouldn't need to know that to treat someone with respect. The badge I carry shouldn't be the reason my son is safe tonight." Her words hit them hard. The bystanders murmured quietly, many nodding in agreement. One older man stepped forward slightly, saying softly, "She's right." The officers lowered their heads. They knew there was nothing they could say that would undo the way they had treated the boy. The mother took out her phone and asked for their badge numbers. Her voice was still calm but firm. They hesitated for a second before giving them. She noted them carefully. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll be filing a report about this, not because I want revenge, but because I want to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else's child." The crowd began to slowly disperse, whispering among themselves. A few people came up to her quietly, thanking her for standing up and saying what they always wanted to say but never could. She thanked them politely, not with pride but with quiet strength. She wasn't looking for applause. She was simply doing what was right. As she and her son walked toward their car, the tension in his body began to ease. He looked up at her, still confused by how quickly everything had happened. "Mom," he said softly, "why did they stop me? I didn't do anything." She looked down at him, her expression heavy with sadness but filled with love. "I know you didn't," she said. "Sometimes people see what they want to see instead of what's true. But that doesn't mean you have to carry their mistakes on your shoulders." He nodded slowly, but the fear still lingered in his eyes. She put her arm around him and guided him to the car. When they got inside, she started the engine and took a deep breath. For a moment, they just sat in silence. The hum of the car filled the space where words couldn't reach. "You handled yourself well," she finally said, breaking the quiet. "You stayed calm even when they didn't. That takes strength." "I was scared," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I thought something bad was going to happen." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "It's okay to be scared. What matters is that you stayed respectful and didn't lose control. You did exactly what you were supposed to." He stared out the window, watching the sun sink lower behind the trees. The world outside looked the same, but he felt different inside. A small piece of his innocence had been taken away, replaced with a new awareness of how quickly things could go wrong. When they reached home, he went straight to his room, while his mother went to her office. She sat at her desk for a long time before turning on her laptop. The events of the evening played over in her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. She had seen injustice before in her career, but seeing it happen to her own child hit differently. She opened a new report form and began typing, detailing every detail she could remember: the time, the location, the officers' names, their words, their tone. Halfway through writing, she stopped and looked at the framed photo of her son on her desk. He was smiling in that picture, carefree and full of life. Her chest tightened. She had always known that being a parent meant protecting her child from the world, but she never thought she'd have to protect him from the people sworn to serve and protect. Her phone buzzed with a text from a colleague. It read, "Saw the video online. Are you okay?" She hadn't realized someone had already uploaded it. The thought made her uneasy, but maybe it was for the best. Maybe this time people would see the truth for what it was. She sighed deeply, finishing her report and saving it. Then she closed her laptop and sat back, letting the weight of the day sink in. Her thoughts drifted to her son. He was quiet tonight more than usual. She knew he was processing what happened in his own way. She walked to his room and knocked gently before stepping inside. He was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. She sat beside him. "You okay?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "I don't know. I just keep thinking about how they looked at me. Like I was someone else." She nodded, understanding every word he didn't say. "That look says more about them than it does about you," she said. "You're kind, smart, and good-hearted. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." He looked at her, his eyes glassy but strong. "Thanks, Mom." She smiled gently and brushed his hair back from his forehead. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day." When she left his room, she stood in the hallway for a moment, staring out the window. The night was calm, but inside her a quiet fire was burning. She had spent her career chasing justice, but tonight, she felt the weight of how fragile it really was. She knew that real change wouldn't come from one confrontation, or even one video. It would take time, voices, and courage, and she was ready to do her part. As she turned off the hallway light, she whispered to herself, "Never again." The promise wasn't just for her son. It was for every parent who feared the same thing, and for every child who deserved to walk home without fear. The night grew quiet again, but something had changed. A line had been drawn, and she was determined to make sure it was never crossed again. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, filling the house with quiet warmth. The boy woke up slowly, his mind still heavy from the events of the day before. For a few moments he just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of birds outside. Everything seemed calm now, but he could still feel the echo of fear from the night before. It clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake off. Downstairs, his mother was already up. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, scrolling through her phone. Her face was calm, but her thoughts were racing. Overnight, the video from last evening had spread quickly. It had been shared hundreds of times, drawing comments and reactions from people across the community. Some were angry. Others were grateful that the truth had been caught on camera. But what struck her most were the messages from parents who said they had been through the same thing, or feared it might happen to their own children one day. When her son walked into the kitchen, she smiled softly at him. "Morning," she said. Her voice was gentle, trying to ease the heaviness in the air. "Morning," he replied quietly, sitting across from her. His eyes drifted to her phone. "Are people still talking about it?" She nodded. "Yes, it's been shared a lot." She hesitated for a moment. "Some of the officers' supervisors already reached out to me. They want to meet." He looked at her nervously. Are you in trouble? No, she said with a small smile. I'm not. But I think they realize what happened last night can't be ignored. He nodded slowly, taking a sip of juice. The silence stretched between them again, heavy but not uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with thought, reflection, and a quiet kind of strength. After breakfast, she drove him to school. As they pulled up near the entrance, he noticed a few kids staring, whispering to each other. He felt a rush of embarrassment, but also something new, pride. Some of his friends gave him a small nod, the kind that says, "We saw what happened. We're with you." He didn't say anything, but it meant more than words could. His mother squeezed his shoulder before he got out of the car. You're brave, she said softly. Remember that. He smiled faintly. Thanks, Mom. Watching him walk into the building, she felt a mix of relief and worry. She knew the world could be harsh, but she also knew that her son was growing stronger through every challenge. Still, the protective part of her heart ached. Later that day, she sat in a meeting room at the local police department. The 2 officers involved were there, along with their captain and a few other senior officials. The atmosphere was serious but calm. She wasn't there to argue. She wanted understanding, not revenge. One of the senior officers began. We reviewed the footage and we recognized that mistakes were made. The situation was mishandled. We're taking steps to make sure incidents like this don't happen again. She listened carefully. That's good to hear, she said quietly. But I want to be clear. This isn't just about my son. It's about how young people, especially young black boys, are seen and treated. You can have all the training in the world, but if fear and bias still guide your actions, then that training means nothing. The room fell silent. Her words carried weight because they came from both a professional and a mother's heart. One of the officers who had stopped her son spoke up, his voice low. Ma'am, I'm sorry, truly, I didn't mean for it to go that way. She looked at him for a long moment before nodding. I appreciate that, she said. But an apology only means something if it's followed by change. I hope you mean it enough to learn from it. He nodded earnestly, eyes downcast. The captain assured her that new community outreach sessions and training programs would be started immediately. She hoped they would follow through. When she left the station, she didn't feel victorious or angry. She just felt tired. But in that tiredness, there was also a small sense of hope. Change didn't come quickly, but maybe this was a start. That evening, she came home to find her son sitting on the couch watching the news. The story had made it to local television. They showed parts of the video, carefully edited, along with comments from community members. Some praised her for stepping in, while others questioned the officer's behavior. It was surreal seeing their faces on screen, but it also made everything feel real. Her son turned to her. People are saying you're a hero, he said softly. She shook her head, sitting beside him. I'm not a hero. I'm just your mom. I did what any parent would do, he smiled. Yeah, but not every parent could have done it like you did. Her eyes softened. Maybe, but I hope one day no parent has to. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the screen. Then she turned it off and said, Let's go outside. They stepped onto the porch. The evening air was cool, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood felt peaceful. People walked their dogs, kids played down the street, and the world seemed ordinary again. Mom, he said quietly after a few minutes, do you think things will ever really change? She took a deep breath, thinking carefully before answering. Change takes time, she said. But every voice that speaks up, every story that's told, pushes things a little bit forward. Yesterday, people didn't know what happened to you. Today they do. And that means something. He nodded, staring at the fading sunset. I guess so.